Struggling through fatigue, elevated cravings, and poor recovery from your workouts? Then fix your sleep. Hi humans, and welcome to Healthier and Happier with Hana. This is Hana, and today's episode is the first in the new season where every week we will cover a particular topic under wellness to get a better understanding of health and fitness as a whole. And today we are breaking down sleep. We're talking about the role of sleep, how it's tied to so many other parts of the body and the mind, the effects of neglecting your sleep, and of course, how to improve it. This episode will by no means be an exhaustive resource, but will hopefully balance between being educational and informative enough to help you get a better understanding of sleep and why it's so important without being too overwhelming. So first off, what is the role of sleep, or rather the roles of sleep, for there are many. So some really important ones to note include the following, and I am going to try to keep this very relevant to not just gym goers or people trying to get in shape, but also for long-term health that applies to everyone regardless of your goals. But to start, I will address the major role sleep has when it comes to recovery and cellular repair, because during sleep is when we actually release the most amount of human growth hormone, which is responsible for these two things: cellular repair in general, which then also includes muscular recovery from your training. And fun fact, you don't technically build muscle when you're training. You create the stimulus when you're training, but your muscles start to build when they are recovering. So sleep is really important for that. But this is also where the term beauty sleep comes from, because obviously if you are sleeping enough, then you are giving your body enough time in this period of releasing the most amount of human growth hormone, which is, as we said, responsible for cellular repair as a whole. And that doesn't just include your muscles, but it also means your skin, your nails, and all that jazz. And so in a pretty roundabout way, your sleep is kind of responsible for how attractive you look, how good you look, how healthy and youthful you look. But it's not just responsible for physical appearance, because it is also directly tied to supporting focus and cognitive function and memory. And I'm sure you don't even need me to tell you this, but if you can think of like one time where you woke up from a really bad night's sleep, or even several days of not sleeping very well, you were probably very foggy. Your brain was unfocused. You would feel exhausted. You wouldn't be able to concentrate. You might even be very forgetful, and it's hard to remember things. And if this is how you feel in the short term after one or a few nights of bad sleep, I'm sure you can kind of imagine the repercussions of doing it over the long term, because in the long term, you then put yourself at greater risk of early cognitive decline. And as you age, you might be at greater risk of certain disorders, things like Alzheimer's, or even just general forgetfulness. And your problem-solving skills are also greatly affected by sleep, again, both in the short and the long term, especially if you consider our different sleep cycles. So for example, if we zoom in on REM sleep, which just stands for rapid eye movement sleep, and it's when we dream, that tends to be when our brains make connections and gives you creative solutions to problems you've been having. You know how some people say sleep on it when you have a decision to make or when you're trying to problem solve? That's kind of where this comes from. It's because sleep helps you make connections and introduces you to different solutions. It helps you problem solve and make better decisions. When we sleep is also when our brains consolidate information. And so it's really important for learning, because you can stay up all night trying to cram information into your brain, but your brain actually needs sleep to solidify the information. And by the way, it's not just information. It's also if you're trying to learn a skill, you need the sleep to kind of solidify that. Sleep is also really important for emotional regulation as well as hormone balance. And a really direct example of both of these things being affected together is something like having greater cortisol when you've not been sleeping well. As we all know, cortisol is the stress hormone. And while cortisol is in and of itself not a bad thing, we actually need cortisol for some functions in the body. But having too much cortisol, or having too consistently elevated levels of cortisol, which by the way also elevates your blood pressure, means you're stressed all the time. And since poor sleep means more stress, it could then lead to developing things like anxiety and depression and general irritability and mood swings. So you can say poor sleep is actually linked to increased emotional reactivity and mental health challenges. And I'm sure you can once again think of an example from your own life when after a really bad night's sleep, you were snapping at people or you were losing your temper. So in some ways, we can even say that sleep affects the quality of your social life and your social interactions, because no one wants to be around a sleep-deprived cranky pants. Another more obvious connection is how sleep is linked to your energy, because it recharges both your body and mind. And without proper sleep, not only do we end up feeling really tired, but we also feel really unmotivated. Another thing you might not feel very motivated to do when you've not been sleeping well is to eat well, to eat healthy. And I'm not just saying that because you don't have the motivation or the willpower. I mean, kind of, but also sleep affects two other hormones, including ghrelin and leptin. These are your hunger and your satiety hormones. When you're not sleeping well, those go out of balance. And when those are out of balance, your cravings are through the roof, and you're not just craving salads and just like really healthy food. You tend to crave foods that are really high in both fat and carbs, and you're more likely to crave processed foods. So whether you are on a diet trying to lose weight, or you are trying to build muscle, or if you're just trying to eat healthy overall, just like generally as a lifestyle, not sleeping well will make all that very challenging. Other physical and physiological symptoms of not sleeping well is the compromising of your immune system, because chronic sleep deprivation or chronic poor sleep can also make you more prone to illnesses because it reduces the immune system's defense abilities. And so I'm sure by now you can tell how well connected sleep is to so many other functions in your body and mind, all the way from mental focus and clarity to your hormones and your immunity. But even specifically for more tangible connections that a lot of people trying to get fit can relate to, it is that it will affect your performance, both mental and physical, and your heart rate and your blood pressure, and even your physique, whether it's your gym gains or your weight. So in short, if you're putting in so much effort trying to eat healthy and go to the gym and trying to change your health and fitness overall, then it would be really stupid not to also make sure you're sleeping well. So hopefully by now I've convinced you to fix your sleep. We've talked about a bunch of the functions and the roles that it plays and the repercussions of not getting enough sleep or not getting quality sleep. So how do we go about that? How do we improve our sleep hygiene? What even is sleep hygiene? And what is our circadian rhythm? And what role does it play in this whole mess? So first off, sleep hygiene is basically just a term that we use to refer to behaviors or habits that we adopt to improve our sleep. And your circadian rhythm is this beautiful system that is in us as human beings. It's your internal clock, basically. Your circadian rhythm is responsible for things like temperature regulation, when certain hormones are released in your body, when you wake up, when you sleep. And it's also important to note that your circadian rhythm has a very cyclical relationship with you. And by that, I mean, yes, your circadian rhythm affects you and your behaviors, but your behaviors can affect your circadian rhythm. So you're not just kind of under your circadian rhythm's control. You can also influence it in turn. And one of the top hygiene sleep practices is to fix your circadian rhythm, align it with what you want. And most of us want to be awake during the day and sleep during the night. One of the things that we can do to fix our circadian rhythm and to align it with that goal is to consider certain functions. For example, your brain secretes melatonin to trigger your body's sleep response. Ideally, we want that to happen at night. However, a lot of people disrupt their natural melatonin secretion because they have bright lights blasting all day long, all night long. At night, they are staring at their screens, blue lights just bright in their faces. They don't even put the night screen settings on. They don't dim the lights. They have bright overhead lights. If you believe in God, God has created this world to be brighter in the day, darker at night. And our bodies, we as human beings, are connected to the world around us. We're connected to the way the world is. We're connected to the sun. We're connected to this brightness during the day, this darkness during at night. So we are meant to be in a darker place in the evenings. And bright lights, as I said, reduce or inhibit melatonin secretion. And therefore, you will not feel sleepy because lights are signaling to you that, oh, wait, day's not over yet. We're still awake. If you want to start to better align and fix your circadian rhythm, one of the ways that you can signal for your body that it's time to go to bed soon is to dim the lights. Get rid of blue lights. Get rid of screens. Ideally, at least an hour before bed. Try to turn off all screens, but at the very least, have blue light filters on. So just either warm screens or blue light filters, glasses, or whatever you want to use. But again, ideally, at the very least, the very last hour before you go to bed, just try to turn all screens off. Do something like reading instead, maybe do a puzzle, whatever. Has to be calming, has to kind of, relax you. Don't engage in too much physical activity too close to bedtime because that energizes you and that tells your body, oh, wait, we're going to do stuff now. It's not time for bed. So like things like training, for example, I try to get my training earlier in the day. And listen, we work with what we have. I understand that some people just have schedules that need them to train at night. We all have very varying schedules, very different schedules. And so if the only time that you can train is at night, like, yeah, sure, fine. But if you can train earlier in the day, do it. And if you want to move at night, just keep it very gentle. Try something like a gentler yoga, just a few stretches, calming breaths, relax, unwind. Because again, that's all telling your brain and your body it's time to go to bed now. The reverse to dimming the lights at night is then to have really bright lights in the morning. So ideally within 30 minutes of waking, we want to get some sunlight in our eyes. Don't stare directly at the sun, please. I beg of you, don't blind yourself, but like look in the general direction of the sun and just try to hang out there for like 5 to 10 minutes if the sun is bright. If it's cloudy or if it's not quite out yet, you may need up to like 30 minutes. And if you, again, just happen to wake up before the sunlight and we have to work with what we have, then blast all your bright lights in the house during the day. It's not going to be the same as the sun, but again, we are working with what we have. And in addition to that, you may have heard a lot of people talk about delaying their caffeine in the morning. And here is the why behind it. When you are awake, our friend cortisol, once again, is elevated. It's supposed to be a little bit elevated in the morning just to keep you awake. So when you are engaging in drinking caffeine also spikes a little bit of cortisol, but that is redundant because you're already producing that. And so when you are drinking caffeine first thing in the morning, you then become heavily reliant and dependent on caffeine to function because you're not letting your body do it for you. So if you can wait 90 minutes to like 2 hours after you wake up, that will allow for your own natural cortisol to just like exist. And then you can drink caffeine and actually reap the rewards. You may feel really groggy in the beginning if you've been drinking caffeine for a really long time and are heavily reliant on it for your energy in the morning. Doing this will not be fun for a few days, maybe a few weeks. I don't know, depends on you as a human, but at least a few days it will not be fun. But once you start to reacclimate, these are all just like things to help get your circadian rhythm back on track, because a lot of people have been bashing their circadian rhythm and just kind of ruining it for years. And so expecting immediate adjustment is not really realistic. It typically takes at least like 3 days to fix your circadian rhythm. So these are all things that are worth noting. Other things that you can and should try. Speaking of caffeine, by the way, not only is it good to try to delay it 90 minutes to 2 hours after you wake up, but also try to stop it 8 hours before you sleep. Some people can get away with like before they sleep by 6 hours. Try to aim for 8, depending on how sensitive you are. And again, a lot of people don't think they're sensitive to caffeine and they're like, oh, like caffeine doesn't affect me or affect my sleep. Listen, it could still affect the quality of your sleep, whether you realize it or not. It could affect it on a smaller level than you can actually grasp. And over a longer period, it could have an accumulative effect. So if you can limit or at least reduce your caffeine intake about 8 hours before bed, if you want to go for decaffeinated drinks or low caffeine drinks. Decaf coffee counts as a low caffeinated drink, by the way, not a decaffeinated drink, because decaf coffee still has a little bit of caffeine. So just keep that in mind. Again, it depends on how sensitive you are to caffeine, maybe switching to things like green tea and matcha a little bit later in the day. But again, trying to limit it at least 6 hours before bed, or just stopping it 6 hours before bed. These are all really good things to try. Other things would include not eating too much before bed, because your body is meant to go to sleep. And yes, listen, I get it. Rest and digest is the part of the nervous system that is responsible for both digestion and sleep. Cool. But there's still two different functions. Okay. I'm not going to go too technical into this, but when your body is digesting, it's not really ready for sleep. It is still doing other things. It might increase your body temperature, and your body temperature is actually meant to cool down before you go to bed. It might just make you uncomfortable. It might give you heartburn, all of that. You might feel heavy just going to sleep. You might not be able to fall asleep because of how much you've eaten. It will very likely disrupt the quality of your sleep. So try not to eat too close to bed. If you've eaten like 2-3 hours before bed and you are just weirdly hungry that day, just have a light snack. Try not to overdo it too close to bed. And speaking of body temperature, things that you can manipulate is having a cool environment in which you sleep, as well as trying a warm or hot shower about an hour or two before you sleep, because what that does is that it kind of introduces this heat, which triggers a cool down response in your body, which mimics the natural cooling down of your body when you are going to bed. So that's something else worth trying out. You can also try keeping your bed just for sleeping. So don't do any work in your bed. Keep your devices out. Keep your laptop out of the bed. Just try to have this designated space to sleep so that your body, I point at my mind and said my body, but so your mind looks at the bed, you're in bed, and it's like, oh, okay, it's time to sleep now. We're not going to do work. We're not going to have all these crazy ideas. We're not going to engage in too much. All things worth trying, because the sheer volume of people that I know who have poor sleep hygiene is truly terrifying. And I have some friends and family coming up to me and saying things like, hey, like, I'm thinking of doing a sleep study because I've been like feeling weird and whatever, because I've done a sleep study. And so 2 months ago, I haven't had a family member ask me, hey, like, remind me how you did your sleep study. And I was just like, no, you don't need a sleep study. You need to stop scrolling on your phone until 2 a.m. in bed, and then waking up 4 or 5 hours later to go to work, only to come home, nap during the day for hours on end, and then try to do this whole cycle again. And then have revenge sleep over the weekend. No. Fix your sleep first, because, by the way, most sleep doctors, from what I know, will not give you a sleep study unless all your sleep hygiene is like checked and tried. And as someone who has a sleep disorder, I fully envy people who have natural sleeping pattern tendencies. Like, if you have the potential to sleep naturally and fix your sleep naturally, do it. Like, it's so infuriating, because I wish I could have good sleep like that just by fixing my sleep hygiene. My sleep hygiene is perfect, but I just have a sleep disorder that I can't control. So I really envy people who have the opportunity to fix their sleep without needing any external help. So please fix your sleep hygiene before getting tested for a sleep disorder, especially if you don't have health insurance, and it will just cost you for no reason. And all of these things are just really easy to do. A big one would also be to have consistent sleep and waking times. Listen, it doesn't have to be the exact same minute every single day, but give or take like 30 minutes upon waking and sleeping, have that as like a general time. And for an example of how I would ideally go about this is, I would say if I wake up at 6 a.m. and sleep at 9 p.m., around then every day, I would not have caffeine before at least 7:30 a.m., maybe 8 a.m. I would not have caffeine past 1 p.m. I would start to unwind at around 7 p.m. So I turn my screens off. I try not to engage in too much physical activity. I start to relax. I pick up a book. I will have to walk my dogs out. Personally, I do walk them out in the last few minutes just before I go to bed, but it's a chill walk. It's not like anything insane or intense. First thing in the morning, I wake up, I step outside. Once I wash up and stuff, I just take them out for our walk, and we just stay outside for a little bit so that we can get our sunlight, all three of us. And I have breakfast quite early on in the day. I try not to eat past 6 or 7 p.m. I try to keep a cool room. Ideally, you would take your shower like an hour or two before bed, but I personally take it just after our walk, because I like being clean like right before I get into bed. But yeah, these are all the tips. They're all super easy to implement. They're really nothing crazy or major. I'm not going to tell you to go out and buy some crazy supplements. You could, under the supervision of a doctor, try melatonin. If everything else you've done is not working, then maybe look into that. But again, under the supervision of a healthcare professional, like a licensed doctor. But you probably really don't need to. Just do everything right, and your body will thank you. Anyway, this is like the fourth time or fifth time that I record this episode because of fun technical difficulties, because I really wanted this to be a good, clear episode for you, because sleep is so important and it's so foundational. And I wanted to start the season with this really, again, foundational topic that a lot of things can build on top of. If you have to fix one thing in the beginning, I would urge you to please start with your sleep. But anyway, today's episode will be ending on sort of a journal prompt, sort of an exercise. I will invite you to track your sleep for like 3 to 5 nights and ask yourself a few things in the morning. Ask yourself, how well were you rested after your sleep? Maybe give yourself a score between 1 to 10. And also ask yourself, how many of these sleep hygiene checklist points that I shared are you actually engaging in? And then try to see what else you can incorporate. See if maybe you can gradually start adding one more thing. Maybe go to bed a little bit earlier, or maybe try to turn your screens off a little earlier, or whatever. Delaying your caffeine. Play around with a few things. See if your sleep improves before you go get a sleep study done. I'm so excited for you to notice how well your energy improves, your focus, your performance, the aching soreness after your gym sessions. So excited for you. But anyway, considering this is the 4th time that I record this for you, because I am so invested in you sleeping better and fixing your health and becoming healthier and happier, could I please ask you to follow the podcast if you are listening on an audio platform like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever. And if you're on YouTube, please consider subscribing to the channel. That would mean a lot to me. It'll help the channel and the podcast grow. And if you want more content, you can follow me on Instagram and TikTok. And again, if you're on audio, YouTube, all under the same name. It's just Hana Maray. That's HANAMAR, the number 3 and an I. I'll have everything linked in the description down below. And if you're on YouTube and you want more wellness content, you can click either video on the screen. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next episode. Sending you lots of love and light.